Sage Wanderer coming at you from deep in the heart of Texas. And today I want to talk about that crazy little devil fighting church I used to work for. You know, there was a lot of strange things about that crazy little devil fighting church. If you've not seen any of those videos, you can check it out in the Crazy Little Devil Fighting Church playlist. But I think one of the most bizarre things about that little church was that somehow they had been given $6 billion. That's right, $6 billion with a B. Wow. Don't. Who would give some little church in the middle of nowhere $6 billion? You know, that's more than Donald Trump was asking for to build the wall along the Mexican border. So where did they get $6 billion? Well, I found out pretty quickly they weren't going to let me have any of it. I was like, I could build a really big youth stadium and have round-the-clock Christian rock concerts. I mean, you know. But, yeah, it came with directives. It came with some very specific directives. And no one was allowed to take any money from it, apparently, according to what I was told. Not even for salaries. The money was to be used exclusively to build hospitals and schools and technical schools like ag schools in the Ivory Coast of Africa. Don't. Well, it does seem bizarre that they would pick this little church, except we did have an African connection. We had a sister church in Africa that was a huge growing church that was heavily centered in the Ivory Coast and also in Nigeria. So there were these big African churches that we were involved with, and I suppose that's why they chose this church, the Crazy Little Devil Fighting Church, to give $6 billion to. But who gave them the money? Who has $6 billion just laying around? I think I'd like to give $6 billion to this little Crazy Devil Fighting Church down here to make hospitals in the Ivory Coast. It's just weird. Right down to, you know, everybody in the church being ex-military and everybody in the church being, you know, somehow related to the government in a lot of ways. So, I mean, so many of those boys went off and joined the military that were in my youth group. So many of them went to Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, but, you know, I didn't know who George Soros was back then. But now, looking at everything about this crazy little devil fighting church, for one, they're moved to be Catholic. And I lay that alongside Pope Francis and his statements about, you know, bringing all of the faiths of the world together. And that, you know, this crazy little devil fighting church started preaching this convergence movement where they, you know, everybody's all, we like respect everyone's religion, but not really. It's more like, let's homogenize all of the faiths into one kind of generic kind of, you know, standardized government version of Christianity. And then let's put that in league with, you know, other religions. And I think the Crazy Little Devil Fighting churches, you know, they mainly wanted to merge with Judaism. They wanted to have a evangelical Christian merge with Judaism and Catholicism in some strange kind of hybrid stew. And so maybe the $6 billion, you know, I've had a little bee in my bonnet about money lately. And, you know, it's not, money's not the root of all evil. It's the love of money. It's the root of all evil. But you have to be so careful. Money corrupts so quickly. And I'm afraid the $6 billion corrupted them, or it was a sign that they were corrupted. That's a whole lot of moolah, y'all. That's a whole lot of lettuce. That's a whole lot of cabbage. Man, that's a whole lot of cash. So, and they also, like, they hired Enron. They hired Enron to build all of those schools in the Ivory Coast. And then right after that, hang on to your hat, y'all. You thought you were going to be talking about a church and you're getting some international intrigue here. Right after that $6 billion was successfully invested in infrastructure, before they could start classes, before they could start taking patients at the hospitals, while the buildings were still just big, concrete, reinforced buildings, unfinished inside, a civil war breaks out in the Ivory Coast, and all of those buildings get occupied by anti-government rebels in a civil war, and all of the buildings that were built, all $6 billion worth, gets bombed to rubble by the National Air Force of the Ivory Coast to put down this civil war in response to this uprising that was ironically centered around these buildings that were built with that $6 billion. Don't. How deeply is your church involved? Are a bunch of churches involved in the New World Order? Have the churches been purchased and bought and paid for? How many of them have been? If the love of money is the root of all evil, do you think that the churches should be the place where wealth is stored and built up? And I mean, aren't you just asking to get corrupted? I don't know. I've been looking back on my life, coming back here to Texas, and I've been looking at it with the older eyes of a sage, with an older wisdom, and some stuff looks really fishy in retrospect. Like, how'd that crazy devil fighting church get $6 billion? God save our republic.